I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Brenda Patterson standing in my driveway with her arms crossed, wearing her signature pearl necklace, and that expression she always got when she was about to make someone's life miserable. It was a Tuesday morning in Mesa, Arizona, and I had just gotten home from my shift at the construction site, covered in dust and ready for a cold beer. "Trevor Quincy," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk about your garage." I sighed, setting down my lunch box on the hood of my truck. Brenda was the president of our homeowners association in the Desert Springs community, a position she wielded like a medieval warlord with a battle axe. She was in her late 40s, always impeccably dressed despite the Arizona heat, and had made it her life's mission to enforce every single HOA rule with the enthusiasm of someone who had nothing better to do. "What about my garage, Brenda? I've noticed you have some equipment in there." "Professional-grade equipment." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through what looked like photos, including a Miller Dynasty 280DX welder. That's quite an expensive piece of machinery. I felt my jaw clench. "Have you been taking pictures of my garage?" "The door was open last week when I drove by. I happened to notice it." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The HOA is organizing a community beautification project. We're installing decorative iron fences around the neighborhood entrance, and we need a welder. I'm here to let you know we'll be borrowing yours." "You'll be what now?" "Borrowing it. For the community. It's for the greater good of Desert Springs." She spoke like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I'll have someone pick it up tomorrow morning." I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Brenda, that welder cost me $8,000. It's how I make my living. Nobody is borrowing it." Her expression hardened. "According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA Covenant, all residents must contribute to community improvement projects when called upon. You can either loan us the equipment willingly, or we can discuss this at the next board meeting." That section talks about participating in neighborhood cleanups and volunteering time, not handing over thousands of dollars worth of personal property. I had read the covenant thoroughly when I bought my house 3 years ago, specifically because I had heard horror stories about HOAs. "The answer is no." Brenda's face turned red. "This is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that's ruining this community. We're trying to improve property values for everyone, and you're being obstinate. I'm being reasonable. Buy your own welder if you need one. The HOA budget has already been allocated for this quarter. We don't have funds for equipment purchases." She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Be a team player, Trevor. You don't want to make an enemy of the HOA board." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check." She turned on her heel and walked back to her white Lexus, parked right in front of my mailbox despite there being plenty of curb space. "You'll regret this decision." I watched her drive away, already knowing this wasn't over. Brenda Patterson didn't back down from anything, and she had a reputation for making life hell for residents who crossed her. The last guy who refused to repaint his house the exact shade of beige the HOA demanded ended up with violation notices every single week for 6 months, until he finally sold and moved away. That evening, I called my buddy Marcus, who lived 2 streets over. He had been dealing with Brenda's nonsense for 5 years. "She wants to borrow your welder." Marcus laughed so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Man, that woman has lost her mind. Last month she tried to make me donate my lawn mower to the HOA so the landscaping committee could use it. Said it was my civic duty." "What did you do?" Told her where she could stick her civic duty. "She gave me 3 violation notices in 2 weeks. My trash can was visible from the street for more than 12 hours. my garden hose wasn't the approved green color, and apparently my doormat was half an inch larger than the maximum allowed size. You're kidding. I wish I was. She's got nothing but time on her hands since she retired from her real estate job. Making people miserable is her full-time occupation now. After hanging up with Marcus, I made sure my garage was locked tight. I even installed a new deadbolt on the side door that led from the garage into my backyard. Maybe I was being paranoid, but something about the way Brenda had looked at my welder made me uneasy. The next morning, I woke up to find a formal letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It was a request for equipment loan with a bunch of legal jargon that basically said I was required to let them use my welder for their project. There was a line at the bottom for my signature, agreeing to loan the equipment for an undetermined period of time with no compensation. I crumpled it up and threw it in the recycling bin. 2 days later, I came home from work to find my garage door open. Not just unlocked, but wide open, with Brenda standing inside looking at my welder like she was mentally calculating how to move it. "What the hell are you doing in my garage?" I shouted, jogging across the driveway. She turned around, not even looking guilty. "The side door was unlocked. I assumed you had reconsidered and were making the welder available. That door was locked. I locked it myself this morning." I looked at the door and saw scratches around the lock. "Did you break into my garage?" "Don't be dramatic. I simply checked to see if it was open, and it was. Get out, now." "Trevor, you're being incredibly difficult about this. The project starts next week and we need that welder. And I need it for my job. I have 3 contracts lined up that require welding work. That's how I pay my mortgage. Now get out of my garage before I call the police." She gave me a look that could freeze lava. "You're making a very big mistake. The HOA board will hear about your uncooperative behavior." "Good. Tell them. And tell them I'll be filing a police report about you breaking into my property." Brenda left, but she made sure to walk as slowly as possible, making a show of examining everything in my garage on her way out. I immediately called the Mesa Police Department and filed a report. The officer who came out, a young guy named Rodriguez, took photos of the scratches on my lock and wrote everything down. "Has she done anything like this before?" he asked. "First time she's actually broken in, but she's been harassing me about borrowing my equipment for almost a week now." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "Document everything. Keep a log of every interaction, save all emails and letters, and definitely keep your garage locked. If she comes back, call us immediately. Will anything happen to her for this? We'll go talk to her, issue a warning. If she does it again, you can press charges for trespassing and breaking and entering." After he left, I installed a security camera above my garage door. It was a good one too, with night vision and motion detection that would send alerts to my phone. I felt ridiculous having to do this, like I was living next to a serial burglar instead of just an overzealous HOA president. The next HOA board meeting was that Thursday. I usually avoided these meetings like the plague, but I figured I should show up and set the record straight. The meetings were held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood pool that smelled like chlorine and old carpet. About 20 residents showed up, mostly retirees who had nothing better to do than argue about pool temperature and landscaping choices. Brenda sat at the front table with the other board members. Gerald Morrison, the vice president who was basically Brenda's yes man, Patricia Chen, the secretary who looked perpetually exhausted, and Robert Hamilton, the treasurer who spent most meetings playing games on his phone. Brenda called the meeting to order and went through the usual boring stuff about finances and upcoming events. Then she got to what she called new business. As many of you know, We're planning a beautiful improvement to our neighborhood entrance. Decorative iron fencing that will really make Desert Springs stand out. She pulled up some photos on a projector. However, we've encountered an obstacle. One of our residents has refused to loan the HOA his professional welding equipment for this community project. I felt every eye in the room turn to look at me. I'm not naming names, Brenda continued, though she glanced directly at me. But this kind of selfish behavior is detrimental to our community spirit. We're all supposed to work together to make this neighborhood better. I stood up. Can I respond to that? Brenda looked annoyed. This isn't a debate forum. You just called me out in front of everyone. I think I deserve a chance to explain. She sighed dramatically. Fine, keep it brief. Brenda asked to borrow my welder, which is an $8,000 piece of professional equipment that I use for my job. I said no because I need it for work, and because I'm not comfortable loaning out expensive equipment that could be damaged or stolen. She responded by breaking into my garage 2 days ago. I filed a police report. The room erupted in murmurs. Patricia Chen looked up from her notes with surprise. That's a complete misrepresentation of events, Brenda snapped. The door was open. I did not break in. The police photos show scratches on the lock consistent with forced entry. Officer Rodriguez from Mesa PD can confirm that. Gerald Morrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should table this discussion for now and focus on finding alternative solutions for the fencing project. There is no alternative, Brenda said. Renting a welder for the time we need would cost over $3,000. Buying one is even more expensive. Trevor has one sitting in his garage that he's not even using during the day. Because I'm at work using it, I'm a welder. That's my profession. An older woman in the back raised her hand. Why don't we just hire a professional to do the welding? Seems safer anyway. That would cost $5,000 for labor alone, Brenda replied. We're trying to save money by using community resources. By stealing my equipment, I added. Nobody is stealing anything. We're asking for temporary use of equipment for community benefit. If you were a real team player, you'd understand that. I sat back down, realizing this was pointless. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes, mostly devolving into arguments about whether the HOA could mandate equipment loans. Patricia Chen pointed out that nothing in the covenant actually gave them that authority, which made Brenda even more irritated. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to me and quietly expressed their support. Apparently, Brenda had made a lot of enemies over the years with her aggressive enforcement of rules and tendency to treat the HOA like her personal fiefdom. She tried to make me get rid of my garden gnomes last year, an elderly man named Frank told me. Said they were visual clutter. I've had those gnomes for 20 years. Did you get rid of them? Hell no. I added 3 more just to spite her. I drove home feeling somewhat vindicated but also anxious. Brenda didn't seem like the type to let this go. I was right. The next morning, Saturday, my security camera alert went off at 6 in the morning. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the live feed. Brenda was in my driveway, trying the garage door handle. When it didn't open, she walked around to the side of the house toward the backyard gate. I called the police immediately, then threw on clothes and ran outside. By the time I got to the backyard, Brenda was at the garage side door doing something with the lock. "What are you doing?" I yelled. She jumped, clearly not expecting me. "I left my phone in your garage the other day. I was just trying to retrieve it. You didn't leave anything in my garage. And that's the second time you've tried to break in. The police are on their way." Her face went pale. "You called the police. Trevor, that's completely unnecessary. You're trying to break into my garage, again. That's exactly when you call the police." She backed away from the door. I wasn't breaking in. I told you I left my phone. Then why is your phone in your hand right now? Brenda looked down at the phone she was holding, then back at me. For the first time since I'd met her, she seemed at a loss for words. Officer Rodriguez showed up 10 minutes later, this time with a partner. They reviewed the security footage on my phone, showing Brenda clearly attempting to manipulate the lock on the side door. Mrs. Patterson, we spoke about this 3 days ago, Rodriguez said. You were warned about trespassing on this property. I had a legitimate reason to be here, Brenda insisted. This is a misunderstanding. The camera shows you attempting to pick or force the lock. That's not a misunderstanding. That's attempted breaking and entering. They ended up arresting her. I watched as they put her in handcuffs and led her to the patrol car, her face bright red with rage and humiliation. Several neighbors had come out to watch, probably woken by the commotion. This isn't over, Trevor, Brenda shouted as they put her in the car. The HOA will make sure you regret this. After she was gone, I went back inside and made coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I had never had anyone arrested before. It felt surreal. Marcus came over an hour later with donuts. Dude, I heard Brenda got arrested at your place. Is it true? Yeah. She tried to break in again. Got it all on camera this time. Man, she's really lost it over this Welder thing. What is her problem? I think she's not used to people saying no to her. She's been running this HOA like a dictator for so long that she can't handle someone standing up to her. Brenda made bail that afternoon. I know because she sent me an email at 5 p.m. from her phone. It was unhinged, rambling about how I was destroying the community, how I was selfish and cruel, and how she would make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. She also threatened to sue me for false arrest and defamation. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, a friend from high school named David who specialized in real estate law. He called me within an hour. Trevor, you need to get a restraining order, David said. This woman is escalating. Breaking and entering twice, threatening emails. This is harassment. Will a restraining order actually do anything? It'll legally prohibit her from contacting you or coming within a certain distance of your property. If she violates it, she goes to jail. No bail, no second chances. Okay. Let's do it. We filed for a restraining order on Monday. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I had to deal with the fallout in the neighborhood. Brenda had apparently sent an email to the entire HOA mailing list, painting herself as the victim and me as an aggressive troublemaker who had her arrested for trying to help the community. My mailbox filled up with nasty letters from residents who believed her version of events. Someone spray painted "selfish" on my driveway. My truck got keyed in the grocery store parking lot, though I couldn't prove who did it. But I also got support from people who knew what Brenda was really like. Marcus organized a counter-email explaining the actual situation. Frank, the gnome guy, went door to door talking to neighbors. Patricia Chen, the HOA secretary, even resigned from the board in protest, sending her own email detailing years of Brenda's abuse of power. The restraining order hearing was on a Tuesday. I showed up with David and all my documentation. The security footage, the police reports, the threatening emails, photos of my keyed truck and vandalized driveway. Brenda showed up with her own lawyer, a nervous-looking woman who seemed to realize she was defending an indefensible case. Brenda wore a conservative dress and had toned down her usual aggressive demeanor, trying to look sympathetic. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Morrison, reviewed all the evidence. She watched the security footage twice, read through the police reports, and examined the emails. Mrs. Patterson, the judge said, You attempted to enter Mr. Quincy's garage on 2 separate occasions without permission. The second time, you were captured on video attempting to manipulate the lock after being explicitly told to stay away and after being warned by police. Is there any dispute about these facts? Brenda's lawyer whispered something to her. Brenda shook her head. No, Your Honor, but I can explain the context. I'm listening. The HOA is trying to complete a community improvement project. Mr. Quincy has equipment we need, and he refused to help his neighbors. I was trying to facilitate a solution that would benefit everyone. My methods may have been overzealous, but my intentions were good. Your intentions were to take someone else's property without permission. That's called theft, Mrs. Patterson. The fact that you claim it was for a community project doesn't make it legal. Judge Morrison signed a document. I'm granting the restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mr. Quincy's property at all times. No contact, direct or indirect. That means no emails, no letters, no phone calls, and no messages through third parties. If you need to communicate about legitimate HOA business, it must go through your lawyer to his lawyer. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Brenda said quietly. I felt relief wash over me. Finally, some protection from her harassment. But Brenda wasn't done. 3 days after the restraining order was issued, my security camera caught someone approaching my garage at 2 in the morning. The motion detection woke me up, and I checked my phone to see a figure in dark clothing trying the garage door handle. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I recognized the build and the way the person moved. It was Brenda. I called 911 while watching the live feed. There's someone trying to break into my garage. I have a restraining order against her, and she's violating it right now. The dispatcher kept me on the line while sending officers. I watched as Brenda moved to the side door and started working on the lock with tools. She was actually trying to pick it this time, using what looked like a professional lock pick set. She's picking the lock now, I told the dispatcher. This is the 3rd time she's tried to break in. Police arrived within 6 minutes. I watched from my bedroom window as they approached Brenda, who was so focused on the lock that she didn't notice them until they were right behind her. She tried to run, which was absurd given that she was in my fenced backyard with only one exit. They caught her within seconds. This time, there was no talking her way out of it. She had violated a restraining order, attempted breaking and entering for the 3rd time, and tried to flee from police. They arrested her on the spot. I went outside and provided the security footage to the officers, different ones this time. One of them, a veteran cop with gray hair, shook his head as he reviewed the video. What is wrong with this woman? What's in your garage that she wants so badly, my welder? She wants to borrow it for an HOA project. He stared at me. You're telling me she's doing all this over a tool? An $8,000 tool, but yeah. That's insane. She could buy 3 welders with the legal fees she's going to rack up. They took Brenda away. I later learned that because she violated the restraining order and committed another attempted burglary, the judge denied bail this time. She would sit in jail until her court date. The next HOA board meeting was chaos. With Brenda in jail and Patricia Chen resigned, only Gerald Morrison and Robert Hamilton were left. Gerald tried to run the meeting, but he was terrible at it, stumbling over the agenda and clearly uncomfortable being in charge. Over 50 residents showed up, the most I'd ever seen at an HOA meeting. Everyone wanted to talk about what had happened with Brenda. We need to discuss the president's position, Frank stood up and said. Brenda Patterson has brought embarrassment and potential legal liability to this HOA. She needs to be removed from the board. Gerald cleared his throat. Brenda is still president until she formally resigns or is voted out. Given her current legal situation, perhaps we should wait to see how things unfold. She's in jail for stalking and trying to break into a resident's home, someone shouted. What more do we need to see unfold? The meeting devolved into arguments about proper procedure for removing a board member. Eventually, they scheduled a special election for the following month to vote on removing Brenda and electing a new president. In the meantime, I tried to get back to normal life. I had work to do, contracts to fulfill, but the stress of everything had taken its toll. I wasn't sleeping well, constantly worried that Brenda would make bail somehow or that one of her supporters would vandalize my property again. Marcus came over for dinner one night, bringing his wife Sarah. We sat on my back patio, drinking beer and trying not to talk about the Brenda situation. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked. "I'm okay, just ready for this to be over." "You know she's probably going to face serious charges, right?" Marcus said. 3 attempted burglaries, violating a restraining order, criminal trespassing. That's not a slap on the wrist. Part of me feels bad. I never wanted to get anyone arrested. "Don't feel bad," Sarah said firmly. "She did this to herself." "You repeatedly told her no, you filed police reports, you got a restraining order. She chose to ignore all of that. Those are the actions of someone who needs consequences." She was right. I had given Brenda multiple chances to back off. She had chosen escalation every single time. 2 weeks later, David called me with news. Brenda's lawyer reached out. She wants to make a deal. She'll plead guilty to all charges if the prosecutor agrees to recommend minimal jail time. What does that mean for me? It means you'll need to provide a victim impact statement. You can tell the court how her actions affected you. The judge will take that into consideration during sentencing. I spent several days writing and rewriting my statement. I wanted to be honest without being vindictive. I explained how Brenda's harassment had affected my sleep, my work, and my sense of safety in my own home. I talked about the financial impact of the vandalism and legal fees, but I also acknowledged that I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to feel safe and be left alone. The sentencing hearing was on a cold morning in late October. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with only about 30 seats for observers. Brenda sat at the defense table with her lawyer, wearing an orange jumpsuit since she'd been in custody for the past month. She looked thin and tired, nothing like the imperious HOA president I'd first encountered. The prosecutor laid out the charges and the recommended sentence. 18 months in jail, 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, and restitution for damages, including my legal fees and the cost to repair my vandalized property. Then it was my turn to read my victim impact statement. I walked to the podium, my hands shaking slightly, and began reading. I kept my voice steady, focusing on the facts and my feelings rather than attacking Brenda personally. When I finished, the judge asked if Brenda wanted to say anything. She stood up, and for a moment I thought she might apologize. "Your Honor, I made mistakes in how I handled this situation," Brenda began. "But I want the court to understand that my actions came from a place of community service. I have dedicated years to making Desert Springs a better place to live. I was frustrated by Mr. Quincy's refusal to help with a project that would benefit everyone. I let that frustration cloud my judgment." She still wasn't getting it. Even now, she was trying to justify what she'd done. The judge clearly saw through it too. "Mrs. Patterson, breaking into someone's garage 3 times is not community service. It's criminal behavior. The fact that you still seem to believe you were justified concerns me greatly." Judge Morrison sentenced Brenda to the full 18 months, with a strong recommendation that she complete anger management and counseling programs while incarcerated. She also ordered Brenda to pay $12,000 in restitution and stay away from me for 5 years after her release. As they led Brenda away, she looked at me one last time. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, just defeat and confusion, like she still couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. I left the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. It was finally over. The special HOA election happened 2 weeks later. Gerald Morrison ran for president, but he lost to a retired teacher named Helen Rodriguez, no relation to Officer Rodriguez. Helen's entire campaign platform was transparency, reasonable enforcement of rules, and ending the culture of harassment that Brenda had created. She won by a landslide. One of Helen's first acts as president was to cancel the decorative iron fence project. "We'll revisit it next year when we have a proper budget and can hire professionals," she announced at her first meeting. No more expecting residents to donate personal property for HOA projects. The neighborhood gradually returned to normal. The spray paint on my driveway faded after I pressure washed it. My truck got fixed. I finally started sleeping through the night again without checking my security camera every time I heard a noise. Marcus threw a Brenda's Gone party at his house, which was probably in poor taste but felt therapeutic. About 20 neighbors showed up, all people who had been on the receiving end of Brenda's HOA tyranny over the years. We shared stories, laughed, and toasted to Helen's more reasonable approach to community management. Frank brought his garden gnomes as a joke, setting them up all over Marcus's yard. "Freedom gnomes," he called them. I even got my welder back to work without fear. I took on a big contract fabricating railings for a new office building in Scottsdale, the kind of job I would have been too stressed to focus on during the height of the Brenda situation. About 6 months after the sentencing, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Brenda, sent from the Arizona State Prison Complex where she was serving her time. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was different from anything she'd sent before. No justifications, no excuses. She apologized, genuinely, for everything she'd put me through. She explained that she'd been attending therapy in prison and had come to realize how out of control her behavior had been. "I think I lost myself in the HOA role," she wrote. "After I retired, I didn't have an identity anymore. Being HOA president gave me purpose and power, and I became addicted to that feeling. When you said no to me, it felt like a threat to my entire existence. I know now how irrational that was. I'm truly sorry for the fear and stress I caused you. You were right to stand up to me, and I was wrong to push so hard." I read the letter 3 times. Part of me wanted to stay angry, to dismiss her apology as too little, too late. But another part of me felt something like pity. Brenda had destroyed her own life over a welder, over her inability to accept that she couldn't control everything and everyone. I didn't write back. I wasn't ready for that, and maybe I never would be. But I kept the letter, filed away with all the other documents from that insane period of my life. Helen turned out to be an excellent HOA president. She streamlined the violation process, so people got warnings and chances to fix issues before being fined. She organized actual community events that people wanted to attend, like food truck nights and movie screenings by the pool. She treated residents like adults instead of children who needed constant supervision. The neighborhood thrived under her leadership. Property values went up, but more importantly, people seemed happier. I saw more neighbors outside talking to each other, kids playing in the streets, people actually enjoying where they lived instead of living in fear of the next violation notice. I ran into Patricia Chen at the grocery store about a year after everything went down. She looked healthier, less stressed than I remembered. "Trevor, how are you?" she asked, genuine warmth in her voice. "Good. Really good, actually. How about you?" "Much better since leaving the board." "I should have resigned years ago, but I kept hoping Brenda would mellow out." She laughed. "Obviously that didn't happen. Did you know how bad she was getting? With the break-ins and everything?" Patricia shook her head. "I knew she was pushy and controlling, but I had no idea she'd go that far. When I heard she'd been arrested the first time, I was shocked. By the third time, I realized she needed serious help. I'm glad Helen is president now. The neighborhood is so much more peaceful." We chatted for a few more minutes before going our separate ways, but the conversation stuck with me. How many people had known Brenda was out of control, but hadn't said anything? How many residents had suffered through her harassment quietly, afraid to speak up? The experience taught me the importance of standing up to bullies, even when it's hard, even when you're scared. If I had just given in and let Brenda borrow my welder, she would have learned that her aggressive tactics worked. She would have done it to someone else, escalating her demands until someone finally pushed back. Better that it happened over a welder than something even more serious. 2 years after Brenda's sentencing, I was working in my garage on a Saturday afternoon when I heard a knock. I looked up to see an older woman I didn't recognize standing in the driveway. She looked nervous. "Can I help you?" I asked, setting down my welding torch. "Are you Trevor Quincy?" "Yes." "My name is Dorothy Patterson. I'm Brenda's mother." She held up her hands like she was surrendering. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to talk to you if you're willing." I hesitated, then gestured to a couple of lawn chairs I had set up outside the garage. "Okay, let's talk." We sat down and Dorothy took a deep breath. "Brenda is getting out next month. She served her full sentence and completed all the counseling programs they required. She's coming to live with me in Tucson." "Okay." She asked me to come talk to you. She wanted to apologize in person, but she knows the restraining order doesn't expire for another 3 years. Dorothy pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She wrote this. You don't have to read it if you don't want to. I just promised I'd try to deliver it." I took the letter. "How is she doing?" "Better than she was. The therapy helped. She's been diagnosed with some things, anxiety and control issues mostly, and she's on medication now. She knows she destroyed her life over something stupid." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "She was a good person once. After her husband died and she retired, she just spiraled. That doesn't excuse what she did to you, but I want you to know she's working on getting better." "I appreciate you telling me that, and I'm sorry about her husband. I didn't know. It was 5 years ago, cancer." They'd been married for 23 years. She never really processed the grief properly, just threw herself into the HOA work instead. Dorothy stood up. "Thank you for listening. I know you had every right to slam the door in my face." After she left, I opened the letter. It was longer than the first one Brenda had sent, more detailed about her therapy and realizations about her behavior. She took full responsibility, acknowledging that she'd been abusive and controlling. She thanked me for standing my ground, saying that if I hadn't, she might have kept escalating until she hurt someone or herself. "I hope you can forgive me someday, even though I don't deserve it," the letter concluded. "You were the one person who refused to enable my toxic behavior, and I'm grateful for that now, even though I hated you for it at the time. I hope your life is peaceful and happy. You deserve that." I folded the letter and put it with the first one. I didn't know if I forgave Brenda. Forgiveness felt complicated, but I didn't hate her anymore. I just felt sad that it had taken her losing everything to finally get the help she needed. Life in Desert Springs continued peacefully. I kept welding, building my business and reputation. Helen served as HOA president for 3 years before passing the torch to Robert Hamilton, who turned out to be much more engaged and capable when he wasn't overshadowed by Brenda's domineering presence. The decorative iron fence never got built. Helen's administration decided the money was better spent on playground equipment and updating the community center. Nobody missed the fence project. I never saw Brenda again. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she stayed in Tucson with her mother and got a part-time job at a library. Someone said she'd apologized to several other residents she'd harassed over the years. I hoped she found peace. As for me, I learned to appreciate my boring, drama-free life. I kept my security cameras, though I rarely needed to check them anymore. My garage remained my sanctuary, filled with equipment and projects and the smell of hot metal. Nobody ever tried to break in again. Marcus joked that I should write a book about the experience. Call it the HOA from hell or something, he said. People would eat that up. I'd rather just forget it and move on, I replied. But I didn't forget, not really. The whole experience stayed with me as a reminder about boundaries, about standing up for yourself, about what happens when someone with a little bit of power loses perspective entirely. The welder that started it all still sits in my garage, right where it's always been. It's just a tool, an expensive and useful tool, but still just a tool. I sometimes think about how something so ordinary became the focal point of such an insane situation. If Brenda had just accepted my first no, if she'd been able to let go of control for even a moment, everything would have been different. But she couldn't, and that was her tragedy. I use that welder almost every day now, building and creating and making a living. Every time I fire it up, I feel a little spark of satisfaction. Not because of what happened with Brenda, but because I stood my ground and protected what was mine. Because I didn't let myself be bullied or intimidated. Because I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. The neighborhood thrives now, peaceful and pleasant in the way communities should be. Kids ride bikes in the streets without fear. People chat over fences without worrying about violation notices. The pool area is full of families on summer evenings, laughing and swimming and enjoying life. Helen's reasonable, community-focused approach proved that HOAs don't have to be nightmares. They can actually enhance neighborhoods when run by people who care about residents instead of rules, who value cooperation over control. I still pay my HOA dues every month, and I even volunteer occasionally for neighborhood events. I serve on the Architectural Review Committee now, helping new residents understand the guidelines without making them feel attacked. I try to be the kind of HOA member I wish Brenda had been, reasonable, helpful, and respectful of boundaries. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just let Brenda borrow the welder that first day. Would it have satisfied her? Or would she have just found another excuse to exert control, to push boundaries, to prove her authority? I think I know the answer. Giving in to bullies never works. It just teaches them that bullying is effective. So I'm glad I said no, even though saying no led to months of harassment and stress and legal drama. I'm glad I installed those cameras, filed those police reports, got that restraining order. I'm glad I followed through every single time Brenda escalated instead of backing down, because in the end, standing up to Brenda wasn't just about protecting my welder. It was about protecting my right to say no, my right to boundaries, my right to live in my own home without fear or harassment. Those rights are worth fighting for, and sometimes fighting for them means watching someone else fall apart because they can't handle being told no. That's sad and it's hard to watch, but it's not your responsibility to enable someone else's toxic behavior just to avoid conflict. I learned that lesson in the most dramatic way possible, and I'll never forget it. The sun sets over desert springs most evenings in shades of orange and pink that take your breath away. I sit on my patio sometimes, beer in hand, watching the colors fade and listening to the sounds of my peaceful neighborhood. Dogs barking, kids laughing, the distant hum of air conditioners fighting the Arizona heat. This is what normal feels like. This is what home should feel like. No unexpected knocks on the door, no threatening emails, no security alerts in the middle of the night. Just quiet, peaceful, ordinary life. And my welder sits safely in my garage, locked up tight, ready for tomorrow's work. Right where it belongs, right where it's always belonged. Nobody ever tried to borrow it again.